Welcome back to Two in the Cooler, ladies and gentlemen. Another wonderful episode here. We appreciate you guys listening, watching on YouTube, subscribing, and all of that jazz. It's awesome to see all of those things come in. And besides all that, another great way to support the show is by checking out the merch, okay? And you're going to be happy you did. Just go to snackspot.se/creator/teespring.com or hit the link in this episode description and in our Instagram bio. You can go on there. We've got logo merch, hashtag pizza tipping, Matt can't read, hoodies, t-shirts, long sleeves. We've got pint glasses, bucket hats, whatever you're looking for. It's going to be at snackspot.se/creator/teespring.com. We've got merch not just for this show, but also for Schemin' and Dreamin' with Ben and Jake, the other podcast that we produce right here. And folks, this is not that kind of merchandise that most shows or places are going to give you, or even some, like when people are planning events, and they're like, oh, buy a t-shirt to support this event. And you want to buy it, but you get it, and it's just this weird boxy t-shirt. It's almost like wearing cardboard. It doesn't fit right. It's going to change shape in the wash. I can't explain it. That's not what you're going to get with our merch, okay? We got that tri-blend. Ooh, baby, that tri-blend fabric, okay? This is Target quality merchandise, and again, you can find that at snackspot.se/creator/teespring.com. Take a look, support the show. You're going to be happy you did. We've all had that moment where we get out of the grocery store finally, pull into the driveway, and you realize you forgot this key ingredient. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Am I going to have to drive all the way back to that godforsaken grocery store, wandering around these aisles, people running their carts into each other, just not looking anyone in the eye? The grocery store is a terrible, terrible place. So why bother with it at all, okay? Why not just use Instacart? Because with Instacart, you can get not just groceries, but some of your favorite products from some of your favorite local stores delivered right to your front door in as little as 1 hour. And the best part is right now, Two in the Cooler listeners get free delivery on their first order of $10 or more. All you got to do is spend $10. I mean, what do you even need to buy $10? You could buy like 5 bottles of ketchup, okay, if you really need ketchup or something like that. Whatever. The point is, all you got to do is spend $10, and Instacart's going to deliver it right to your house absolutely free. All you have to do is hit the link in this episode description and get yourself that deal. Make life a little bit easier on yourself and start using Instacart today. And if you're interested in advertising on this show or our twin show, Schemin' and Dreamin', email snackspotsports@gmail.com for details on how you can start reaching thousands of listeners in the Buffalo area and beyond. Okay, folks, listen, podcasting, it's obviously boomed in the past couple of years. I mean, people are getting, certain podcast hosts are getting millions of dollars and things like that. And the reason for that is because they're starting to attract larger advertisers like State Farm, Tropicana. I think Walmart has advertised on some big podcasts. It's crazy that it's attracting these large companies, and it bothers me because now is the time for local, smaller businesses to get in on that action, and there's no better place to do it than with us and with the shows that we produce here. So if you want a little more information on all the benefits of podcast advertising and how you can start getting in on this, just again, email snackspotsports@gmail.com. Rich, thanks for coming on, man.
No problem.
We got a lot to talk about, especially after what happened on Friday, because that was sick. I don't even know where to start, but let's mention the store right up top, the Red Dragon's Hoard on Military Road, Niagara Falls. I remember reading about you in one of those like local like
newspaper
paper things or whatever. But when did you actually open up?
We opened at the 28th of August. It was right before, it wasn't 20, it was the 31st. The very next day it was September 1st. So we opened one day before September.
Got it. Yeah, man, I had to walk in there and meet you and check it out, and it's cool, dude. It's a cool place. And now that my pals and I are playing there regularly, because you have this room in the back, and it's perfect because you can like rent out that room, right?
Yeah.
And it's this like room you can go and play in, and Rich has got like just everything that you like need to play, everything that you'd want to play. But there's like this crazy dungeon master's chair, and there's swords all over the wall. I've been telling everybody about it. Like this,
Nice.
like if people mention me that they play D&D, I'm like, you gotta go check it. There's swords on the wall. That's mostly what I say, but like all this stuff. But I'm very excited to have you on because I talk about D&D like a fair amount, and Matthew it just doesn't go for it.
Well, I'm so curious about it all the time because I feel like in the past, I don't know, and you'll probably correct me. You both correct me on this. Like year or so, it's gotten a lot more attention, right? Like there's, the podcast is a big thing and just other types of content coming out about it. And I listen to it, I watch it, certain things specifically about it. And I've never played. I've watched Andrew play a few different times and like sat in on it. And I'm always just so curious about it because the way that my brain works, my biggest thing that I always say to Andrew is like, how could somebody possibly keep up with me if I'm always having like crazy thoughts in my head about what I would do? Obviously, I don't know like how it exactly works, but do you know what I mean, Andrew? When I ask you like, because the way that, and I guess this is I guess I could use an explanation. Like the way that I understand it is somebody develops a storyline pretty much, or a background of a storyline. And it can be as detailed or up for interpretation as somebody wants.
Well, how it works is one person, like you said, makes a story, but for the most part, the person's just making a backdrop.
Yeah.
Because if you make a straight line story, one character can do something and screw the whole thing up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of DMs out there that will have like a giant book of step by step of everything the player's going to do, and a lot of times they fall short, and then they have to quickly improvise. When I make them, and I try to tell people this, don't ever plan for the characters to do something because they're not going to do what you plan them to do.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of places that the characters may go, and then this way you have stuff ready for it.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a dungeon over in a forest somewhere, and the characters are like, okay, let's go there. And then one player's like, but I don't want to go in the forest. I'd rather go over to this swamp over here. Well, you better have something
for
prepared,
the swamp.
or
Yeah.
at least have some monsters ready for that swamp so you can try to stall the player so you can quickly come up with something when they get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the way that I always think about it. Because my brain kind of works like that, not in D&D, is I'm like, just not meaningless thoughts, but thoughts that have nothing to do with what's actually going on, like in my real life surroundings, but me creating like these crazy scenarios in my head as to what I could be doing where I am. And that's what's so cool about it to me. And I think you use the word improvise, like the ability to be able to improvise, and how, fun it must be when you have somebody DMing, is that what it's called?
DMing or game mastering.
Yeah,
Depends on
game
what you're
mastering. That's really, really good at it. That can kind of like, anticipate, not anticipate, but come up with cool things every time you have a wacky idea.
Or they just have to be a really good liar.
Yeah, that too, and that's also fine with me. Yeah.
It's like, I had that planned all along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you probably had to do your share. When did you start playing? Was D&D your first intro into role-playing
RPGs?
game? Yeah. Okay. What edition did you start with?
Second.
Interesting. Okay. See, what Matthew was just talking about how D&D has become so, it's had like this interesting
grew legs.
yeah, big time. And like the past couple of years, do you think that's all because right now it's on 5th edition, and it's so easy to get into 5th edition. The game mechanics are all based on the D20, which is the 20-sided die.
Yeah.
Do you think that is the main reason why people are getting back into D&D, or like it's had this resurgence, or do you think there are other factors?
I think the biggest factor is probably Critical Role. A lot of the online people online playing the game, people have probably never even heard of it, and they're like, what the heck are they doing here? 5th edition made it easier for people to jump into it right away. So if you were to play 2nd edition, or my personal favorite 3.5 / 1st edition Pathfinder, it's a lot of rules and it's a lot harder to get people interested in it because there's so many mechanics going on. 5th edition makes it a lot easier. It's roll a die, and if you got an advantage over the person, you roll twice and take the higher. You're not dealing with a whole bunch of number crunches and stuff like that. So I think that's what mainly Critical Role and stuff is what's kicked it in mainstream.
And that's what Critical Role is, like rolling, like
A Critical Role is the name of a show.
Okay.
It's like an actual play D&D. I think I don't know if it's like a podcast. It's like a web show or something.
It's a stream.
It's
Okay.
a stream.
They literally are playing while streaming.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you just watch. And Critical Role, well, Emily and I were just talking about it actually, because Critical Role, not too much for me. I like Dimension 20 a lot, which is another actual
There's
play.
a couple
like
good ones out
yeah,
there.
yeah. But it's, I think that a big part of it now also is maybe 5th edition. Like there's a big role play aspect to it. Do you think it's easier to role play with 5th edition because you don't necessarily have to do so many other
To be quite
things?
honest, that just depends on the DM.
Right, okay.
Some DMs, you could give them the simplest rules, and the role play just isn't going to be there. And then some DMs, they could be playing one of the more difficult ones, and there's role playing all over the place. In my personal opinion, 2nd edition is probably better for RP, in my personal opinion. But it just depends on the DM. It really does.
When you're DMing, speaking of role playing and kind of what type of, because it all depends on, like you said, the DM. It also depends on the players a lot, like how the game is going to go. When you're DMing, especially when you have people coming into the store who you might not have played with before, how do you manage it when maybe players seem to want different things out of the game?
Well, the cool thing about this game is if a player wants one thing, you just stick it in. Mainly, if you want your players to have certain things they want them to, you have to know the players. So when you got people just coming in off the street, you're not going to know the things that they want to play unless they tell you. So you put the stuff that the DM personally likes in there, and hopefully the player will like it as well. And over time, unless you're a stagnant DM, you're going to have different elements in there that someone's going to like eventually. If not, that player just isn't coming back.
Right. Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. But I think with like when we play on Fridays, we're playing in a world that you created.
Yeah.
What is it? I mean, me and my pals, we have not explored nearly the extent of it. You showed us the map one time, and it was like, this is where you are. It's kind of this dime area, and now this is actually what
it's big.
you put together.
Well, the reason I made it is because so many people know Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance and all the other campaign settings out there. I wanted to put something out there the characters knew nothing about. And if they wanted to know, they'd have to roll 20s to find out if their character knows. And I thought that was more fun for me because I get to create stuff, and it's more fun for the players because it's real exploration, not, oh, yeah, I know what that is.
Big time.
So when you guys play on Fridays, do you DM for them?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't. Yeah.
It's so awesome because obviously Rich has been doing it for like 26 years or something, and like not just that, but when you go into the sword room, we're playing with a battle mat, and with figures, so we can see how far and where our characters are moving and stuff. And when we would play just the four of us, and a lot of times we had to do it over Zoom because most of the time when we played, it was during the pandemic. It was terrible. It was really, relatively, like we still had a great time, but but a big thing I've noticed is like we get so much more actual playing done and like discovering things now, because when we would do it, it just inherently we were a little less invested, I guess you could say, because we didn't really understand the dimensions of the rooms that we would be in and like where people are respectively when we're fighting and stuff, and it makes a huge difference.
Oh yeah,
that's something that is really cool. And also it's great because like with you DMing, the four of us have never gotten to play together before. Yep. And it's phenomenal. It's everything that I have hoped it would be. It's so, and it's also, like none of us had like any experience of it before, whoever we would have DMing these sessions previous. But with you, knowing your stuff, my original character died like the second session or something. R.I.P. to Gumby Duncan, human paladin. And it was so great because one, he died twice that day. The first time he died, you bailed me out. You had
the deity.
Yes, you had like this pixie cum or something that was sent by the deity and like healed him. And then next thing you know, we're in this cave yelling kill zone, and my character Gumby runs in to they're like these big ants with stingers, dies immediately, and like
no coming back from
there's no coming back from that. But it was so great because I think it was maybe the best thing that could have happened for us, like to start, because one, it lets everybody else know at the table in a way that we had never experienced before. There's consequences to things.
Yeah. That was Friday. You guys learned the consequences of pulling mobs.
So before we get there, because I want to keep going and hearing what's going on, but because podcasts that I've listened to where they've played, I've heard them have people die that come back to life, similar to what it sounds like happened to you at first. Now that your player died again, where do you go? Like, what becomes your role in the game?
It was also a good thing because we needed a different type. We needed a different class of player. So classes like fighter, barbarian, blah, blah, blah. And we didn't have a cleric in our party, which is typically the guy who's going to heal people when they get hurt, and we needed that. We needed it bad. And so that was another reason why it was so great. But so when you die in Dungeons and Dragons, when your hit points go to 0, you roll these death saving throws. Which are those? Have those always been around, or when did those come about?
They've had saves, but not that. It wasn't done like in 5th. Normal in the older editions, at least in 3.5, when you died, you went into negatives. Right. And Pathfinder, you rolled a save. Every time you failed to save, your hit points dropped and dropped and dropped. When it went to a certain point, I think it was your Constitution scoring the negatives, you just died.
Yeah.
And when you got healed, it just healed up the negatives. You didn't go right to 0 or 1 like it does in 5th.
Right.
So that was another question I had. Hit points and stuff like that. Are those kind of developed like when you're writing the storyline, the quest, or are those all standard based off the edition that you're playing for each character
type? The hit points?
Yeah,
it's based off your class.
Okay, so those are like every time you play, if you're going to be a barbarian, you'd have the same hit points if you're playing the same volume?
That depends.
Okay.
When you roll your ability scores, your Constitution can add or possibly take away hit points.
Okay.
And what you do is, let's say he's playing a barbarian, for example, and he has a pretty high con. When you level, you can either go in the book and take the average, or you can roll the die. And if you roll, you can get higher than the average or lower.
The average.
So if you roll, hit points will not be the same as someone else's.
Gotcha.
And depending on your class, the hit die that you roll is going to be different. So barbarian, I think their hit die is like a D10. D12. Yeah. And I always take the average, which is a point I made on Friday because the other guys, especially Sam's character, who's a fighter, he rolled shitty on his hit die. And I was like, dude, I think I might have more hit points than you, and you should be a little more like ready to go. But he fucking, I mean, he's ripped just when he was able to, he was tearing shit apart on Friday. Let's go. Jesus Christ, man. Let's keep talking about that campaign a little bit that we've been doing. Which the man, even though this was with Gumby Duncan, R.I.P., the first time we came in on a Thursday, it was actually, to play at the Red Dragon Hoard. We walked in there, and the first thing you did was hand me a map, and I was like, this is going to be so fucking awesome. And he was like, this is what your character has, and it's told all this, and like, I'm like, yes, let's get right into it. Now that, and you know what, because Gumby, my old character, died, and he had the map, I'm glad that they raided his body, and that Andrew took it, because I was like, if they don't take it, that's it. Like, I'm not saying anything.
Well, is that the again? Is that the thing? Like, your dad, you can't input them on what to do or influence them on what to do, or you're not supposed to.
Yeah, because you basically play what the character would know.
Yep.
So if Gumby died and he had some important information and didn't have a chance to pass it along,
you can't tell. You're not supposed to tell them. Yeah, and I do know that. Yeah, and that is one thing I do know, and I don't necessarily know how it works, but I know there's ways to roll and figure out what information you have, or spells that you can use to, depending on your type of character, to manipulate people or figure out if they're manipulating you, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that way I guess it is pretty straightforward. But again, with 5th edition, it's all D20 based, so really, like, whatever you're trying to do, you just have to roll this die and then add or subtract based on your modifier for perception or intelligence or whatever it is, and then it's super easy. But it's still really, I don't know, it's still really fun, especially because I had never thought about D&D this way before, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Is that it is essentially gambling. Like, you're rolling dice, and sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you do not. Or sometimes you make just a shitty character with a very low constitution, and he dies immediately. R.I.P. Gumby Duncan. That should be the title of this episode. But I'm sorry, I keep getting distracted by Gumby.
Yeah. I want to get back into your campaign.
Yeah, I don't know how many weeks we've actually been playing it now, but it still feels like we've only scratched the surface.
Oh yeah, you guys.
But it's so. But that's a part of it. Like, even on weeks where it's mostly like traveling around and stuff, it's still very fun because you don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea what Rich has got planned, and it's also going back to, like, you have to play what your character knows. So there's sometimes when somebody will perceive something but maybe not super well, so they'll catch like a glimmer. Like, specifically, I think Sam maybe saw a dragon in the woods, like, possibly, but he didn't tell anybody that, and he doesn't even know if he actually saw it or like what the deal was. So
that's it.
That's it. Yeah. So it's like, okay, well.
So information like that, is that something that Sam reads, and that's why nobody else knows it?
No, you say it. Rich will describe what's happening.
So basically, what happened was Sam, I had everyone roll a perception, and he rolled really well. And out of the forest, there was a wormling green dragon looking at them through the forest, and he's seen it. Well, he didn't really tell anyone, and so they can't be like, well, there's a dragon there, because he didn't tell them. So they don't.
So we hear at the table, but there's nothing that we can do about it.
You play it as if you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Because your character's knowing it, but that's still kind of fun because
exactly.
It's almost like a Hitchcock technique a little bit. Like, it's almost like suspenseful. Like, there's something like where it's weird because you as a player are the audience and the character in the movie at the same time. That's trippy, man.
So you guys you said you don't know how many weeks you guys have been going, but you've got a lot left. You died. You are now, who are you now?
So Yeah, so second time we played, Gumby dies in a kill zone situation. And also that was the first time I'd ever played a character of mine had died. So I remember sitting there, and especially after I had already died once earlier that day, I was like, okay, well now I have to think about what I'm gonna do next. And that was a Friday, and I think on Saturday I was still like, fuck, I can't believe Gumby. Before I even got to know him, he just, his life was taken away, and he had a brother that was never brought up in the game or anything, but like all this stuff. And then on Sunday, I started making my new character, human cleric Franklin Sherbert, and as soon as that, I was like, oh shit, okay, well I can do this and this, and I was like, all right, this is cool. But especially because I had played a life domain cleric before.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, is this gonna be like, this is what I want to do, because in part because I think this is what our campaign needs, this kind of character. But is it going to be too similar? And no, absolutely not. Which is another great aspect of the game. You can
too
play
similar
somebody
to the time
previous.
You did it before.
Yes, I was like,
okay.
Is this going to be, too much like the other cleric that I played? And not in the slightest. And that's there's so many rules and whatever structure in D&D, but there's also just so much room for interpretation.
You should try different editions. There's a lot more room and a lot more interpretation for them.
That's what I've heard. I just am I don't know, because 5th edition is so, I'm just worried about having to learning another edition, honestly.
Well, see, the grand thing about it is you don't have to. Your DM has to learn it. You just got to learn as it goes along.
Right.
The DM's the one that has to know everything and make sure everything's running properly. You just have to be there.
I guess that makes sense. That could be. It's just, what I've heard, and I think these are only, I don't know what edition these are in second, but I've just heard people complain about hit tables one too many times.
Oh, hit tables.
Yeah.
That's second edition.
Okay.
The THACO system was rather wacky, but basically how THACO works versus all the other editions is THACO is the to hit number. That's what that means.
Right.
And you would take that number and you would take the AC and minus it from the THACO, and then that would be the number you have to give it to 20. That's why you would have a chart table, because it was a lot of math. So you would just have the chart, here's the AC, here's the THACO, roll it, and you just table it.
Right. And even that, I feel like it's a good thing that 5th edition doesn't have that, because
THACO's a little dated.
So, yeah.
They stopped doing THACO after 2nd. When they hit 3rd, that's when they started. That was the original D20 system. Technically, they both were because you use D20s, but the 3rd edition, they were the ones that started doing the instead of going your AC dropping and getting better, it ascended. And that's when it was better, and then that's when you would roll the 20 versus the AC, and if you add the bonuses and it hits. So 5th took that and simplified it, where the other editions you had all these skill points and you had to figure out your skill numbers were. In this edition, you just color it in and just add your proficiency bonus.
Yeah.
A lot simpler. And that made it a lot more appealing and easier for players to get into it.
Yeah, 100%. It's it's a fun system because, and also I think a lot of people, the first time that they play D&D is with their pals, with usually pretty close friends, I think. Sometimes, sure. I guess that's true. Well, the fellow that came in the other day for the first time, did he just come because he wanted to try it out?
It was funny that he walks in the store, never seen this guy before, and he goes, "I heard you have a game tonight." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I want in." I'm like, "Okay, here's a sheet." So then we made him a tune. He's never played before, and he played his first time with 9 strangers.
Wow.
Yeah, our group was up to 8 people on Saturday.
That's a pretty big game.
So then once you start a game, do you carry on that game for weeks and weeks? And is that something where you have to be there on the night that the game starts to join, or is it that's kind of depends?
That particular game, it's just whoever comes in and wants to play, I'll throw them in.
Okay.
It's getting big, though. I need to get another DM to cut that in half. But for the most part, I'll continue the same game. If someone doesn't show up, I'll figure out a convenient way to explain to the players he's not there right now because he's like sleeping or doing something. And if someone new comes in, I will give that person a story of why they're where they are and how they got there.
Okay. Which, that makes sense to me. So is there different games that you do, like public games? How many private games do you do? Does it just depend on the week? Or
right now, Andrew and his crew are the only ones that I have a private game with besides my own personal.
Yeah.
Tuesdays, we generally we started that game off as a second edition only.
Okay.
And whoever wanted to jump in could. Well, so we started playing that, and the other players wanted DM, and not all of them know second edition. So now we're going to be doing a round robin with that one. So one for 3 months or 3 weeks. We haven't decided quite yet. It's going to start with that edition, and then the next person that DMs is going to pick the edition that they want to play.
Gotcha.
And then we're just going to swap. Tuesdays, that is Tuesday. Wednesday is our D6 Star Wars, and that's basically Star Wars version of D&D.
Okay.
And my friend is the DM for that, so I actually get to play a tune for that
Nice.
one. Then Thursday, we're running another Star Wars one because that group is starting to pick up. And so I'm going to be DMing the Old Republic on that one. So that's going to be like thousands of years before original Star Wars. Then Friday is our private game. And then Saturday is my open house 5th edition game. Anyone can come in. That starts from like 7 to 10, and anyone can join that.
Okay. Which is awesome that there's that much opportunity to play. You did mention some Star Wars stuff before we actually started recording, and it's been sitting in my head. So are those actually separate role-playing games, or are they just storylines of D&D that have been made up to incorporate Star Wars?
It's its own separate.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I hate to say this, they no longer make the D6 version of Star Wars anymore. They made Edge of the Empire, but I thought it was garbage. And then they did make a D20 version of Star Wars. It was cool, but it just wasn't as good as its predecessor.
Yeah.
So all I do is play D6, and I will show people. And the cool thing about it is you can go on D6 Holocron, and you can learn how to play the game and play it for free. So.
Yeah. Which is... So are those then somewhat pre-established stories? You're not making the quest yourself?
Oh, no. I make everything myself.
Okay, that's what, yeah.
I personally do not like using other people's stories because they're not mine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with Star Wars, they give you have rule books. Well, with any edition of role-playing, you have your core rules, and it teaches you the basics of the game, how to make the character, how to play it. And then the DM, his job is to make sure that the game runs smooth and that everyone's having fun playing it. As long as the players are having fun, it doesn't really matter if you're using pre-established stories, or as long as the players are having fun. That's just my personal thing. I hate using other people's work. Yeah. Besides monsters or something like that.
Yeah. Which is cool, though. So then when you're doing that stuff, and I assume that you know a lot about Star Wars.
Huh.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah. Actually, when we were, talking who would win the week earlier, Andrew and I was like, well, I don't really know, blah, blah, and that, Star Wars came up. So we were talking about it a little bit. So when you're, writing those / playing those, and the people that are playing them with you, is there a pre-required, knowledge of Star Wars, and to what extent, or is it just kind of
The grand thing about that particular game, or role-playing at all, you don't need to know nothing about it.
Yeah.
In fact, I love when players don't know anything about Star Wars and play, because then I can introduce aliens that they've never seen before, or mention ships, or they don't have a pre-established idea of
what could it become.
What could happen.
Yeah.
And then when you do alien voices for the different aliens, it makes it even better, because they're like, oh, wow. We actually had a guy playing with us in Star Wars who's only seen Star Wars once. and this was when he was a little kid, so he doesn't remember anything about it. And so we were playing, and he was loving it. He comes back still every day, or every Wednesday to play Star Wars with us, and he lives in Canada.
Wow.
So
Yeah, which is awesome though. It sounds so cool. I know I say this all the time, but then never continue to learn about it. But every time you talk about it, the whole storyline aspect of it is so cool to me. So how often do you sit down and write these out, or is it just when you need one, or do you enjoy doing it? I mean, I'm sure you enjoy it to some extent.
it's funny you said that, because just today or last night I was working on a Star Wars game for my son. And my wife's like, "You amaze me." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You're not sick of this already? You come home and you do it?" This is what I like to do. I enjoy doing it. But when I make stories, I tend to not necessarily write a story as much as I do events around the campaign world.
Yep.
So like I'll have stories for the NPCs. So if
Yeah.
you talk to an NPC, you'll know the reason why they are there where they are, or if
Yeah.
they're poor or whatever. But for the most part, I like to just put, you'll find this here if you go here, and then whatever story I have for the characters to go there, I'll run with that story and then let the characters go on their way. It's like sandboxes. I like to let them run around and be like children in a sandbox.
Andrew talked about, the map. Do you make the maps themselves, or is that something that is part of D&D? Like there's, somewhat pre-established terrain.
They have their own. I make my own.
Okay.
Because we're in Rich's own, like Rich created the
So
whole
that- yeah.
world.
Yeah, there's nothing.
we're
You will
playing
not
in.
find any of my stuff in pre-established or pre-published books or anything like that.
Which
They
is
won't be in
awesome.
Where do you even start when did you start making the world that we're playing in now?
there. Maybe a year ago, 2 years ago at most.
Holy shit. That is surprising because of how big it appears to be. I was like, I did not expect you to say that. I expected it to be like a couple years at least.
I was working at the casino, and I'd have a lot of free time because I worked the late night shift, and there'd be times no one would even come to the store I was working in. So I would just pull my book open, and I would start writing the deities down and coming up with those, and then just drawing the map, and then find a map program, draw it in, and boop, done.
So where do you even let me ask you this. If somebody wanted to do that, where do you think the best place to start with world building is?
Paper and a pencil. That's the best way to do it. Draw your map out and then give yourself a basic setting of why this world's here and why is it different than anything else you're going to use. So with my particular realm, I had, and what's funny about this, because it's slightly similar to Critical Roles, and I didn't find out about this until a month ago, because I don't watch Critical Role, so I know nothing about it. But a friend of mine does, and when I told him that my world, all the gods, they sealed it off so no outsiders can get to it, including themselves. I guess I might be a little bit wrong in this, because like I said, I don't watch it, but I think the deities had a world and they were separated from it as well. So there was a similarity there, but I didn't want deities to have big established parts in the world. I just wanted people, much like it is here in real life. I didn't want too much divine intervention with it, because if the gods are going to do everything, what's the point of doing what I'm doing? So, but what's cool, when I did that with the world, I had a couple little elements there. Like in this world, demons were kicked out, angels were kicked out. You won't see any outsiders there except one type, and I kept succubus there. And the reason being is because they mingle with humans, or mortals, I should say. Well, when the purge happened, when all the outsiders got kicked out of the realm, and the succubus stayed. They didn't get kicked with the purge because it tricked the purge into thinking that they were native. So, boom. I was able to keep those in the realm using that logic. And there's a group called the Archway Clan that is trying to remove the barrier to bring the deities in, but there's another part of that group that they found a hole in a portal, that there's a small gap in the shield around the world, and outsiders pay them to get in. So one part's making money while the other part wants to get rid of it altogether. So there's a little bit of a dispute between the two inside the Archway clan. So I just try to put little groups in there and try to do other things in the realm that other books aren't doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's very interesting. So when you have multiple, I guess when you have any parties playing in the sandbox that is this world you've created, are you also keeping track somewhere else of the other things going on in this world as a whole, like that, for example?
Well, of course. There's I have a campaign sheet that I have written out, and I keep everything on my PC. So if that hard drive goes, I cry. But in different sections of the world, there's different things going on. Like West Zaft and East Zaft, for example, they're at war with each other right now. And if players go to that part, there will be ways that they can change the direction of that war. So if like the players join the Adventurers Guild there and decide, you know what, instead of doing that, we're going to go help these soldiers with this war, they can sway which direction that war goes.
Good or bad.
Exactly.
Depending on if Gumby's there or not.
So
Yeah.
Exactly. So I let the players decide what goes on in my world per se. I don't. Like for the little things, like if this land wants to invade this land, well, they're going to. But I let the players do most of the decisions for me on that. Let them do it.
So I would guess, and again, I don't know, when you first started playing, you were playing but not, writing and doing stuff like this? Or did you, right when you started, you're like, I'm going to start writing? And that, yeah.
When I first played, it was a mess. Like most people that first play. We just opened the book, made characters, and improvised the whole thing. We just went, okay, you see this. Roll dice. Are we rolling that right? Let's read the rules.
Yeah.
So then how long did it take, I guess, to be able to write create these elaborate universes where you have all these different moving parts going on at the same time while you're dealing with what, the players are doing while they're rolling, and how you're able to, I don't even know if I can put it into words exactly. I don't know if you totally understand what I mean, but it seems like there's just so much going on. I feel like if it were me, it would have taken me a long time to figure out how to, and not master it, but get it to a point where it's so good for the people playing.
Well, for the most part, the whole world itself isn't detailed nitty-gritty all the way down. Over here, I know what's going on here. I know what's going on here. I know what's going on here. I know that this area is against this area, that kind of thing. Uh-huh. I don't start writing the nitty-gritties until, let's say, a new group comes in and says, we want to play this. I pull up my map and go, okay, what would be interesting this time? I've already did this. I've already did this. Let's try this. So I'll start the characters over here, and then I'll world build that section as that group is playing.
Gotcha. So have you, or I'm guessing other people, have played the world that Andrew and his friends are playing in right now?
That section? In fact, yes. There's a group that are in that same world right now that I'm playing with, but they're in a total different thing going on.
Yeah,
right now.
Which is the coolest part about it, is that it's completely different.
Right now, they went to a town called Old Hen Bar, and there's a Adventurers Guild there. Now, my Saturday group, right below that town, there's a small town called Renzil there. Now, this was a town I made many, 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 many years ago, and I liked it, but it wasn't originally in this map. And I'm like, I'm just going to stick it here. But what I did, I made it cursed. And what happened is the whole town was turned into stone, everyone in there. And including the players on Saturday, they were turned to stone. So they were in a cage. Well, how I started them off is they were on their way to this town, and they were traveling in a caravan with a wizard. And this wizard went up to the guards and told them they were trying to kill the king. So they got locked up. Well, when they got locked up, I told them that their eyes had a milky film go over them, and then they got a stomach ache. And then the next thing they know is they woke up to a bunch of falling rock sounds. So basically, I explained how they got petrified and unpetrified. They just didn't know it because I didn't tell them they were petrified. So what they did is they seen a dead halfling near them and a ring near their foot, and they look and there's rocks all over the ground. Well, in the other cells, there were prisoners that were turned to stone. That was their hint to show that they've been turned to stone for like 100-something years.
Yeah.
And so they go out into town, and there's spiders all over, so they had to figure out why these spiders and spider creatures are all over and why everyone else in town is turned to stone. So that all happened the same time you guys were doing your game.
When we when we went to the mines and stuff. So they were right there?
Yeah, right below.
Wow, that is cool. When it what it sounds like, the way that you have designed your world is really good because it seems like it really diminishes the possibility of something like imploding and you really having to be on your feet for something because you're allowing so much of it to be created by the players as they're playing.
Well, what I do, because a lot of D&D especially is a lot of traveling from town to town or from dungeon to dungeon. So what I do is in those areas, if I go on my computer, I have a folder for every single solitary terrain on that part of the map. So there's a Forest of Feybarks where you guys are at. I have a folder with all the possible enemies that you could fight there, and I'll randomly just pull it. So if you guys go and do something that I wasn't anticipating, open the folder. Your challenge rating is whatever. I put the challenge ratings on the monster so I know that they're not going to be too hard or too easy for you. Throw it in there. That gives me time to plan ahead for when you get to the destination that you're going to.
Which is a type of planning that I think a lot of people with less experience than you might overthink or get very nervous about.
I used to get real angry at my friends when I was younger because I would do my stories. Like I said, you really, in my opinion, you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
I have this giant story. The character, it's all linear. The characters have to go here and here. And then one player goes, "Well, I ain't doing that." I'd be like, "Well, great. Now we can't play."
I know I've heard a lot of stories like that, and I have played before with people who will do that. And if I can tell that they are trying to bottleneck us, that's when I'm like, that's my like player rebellion essentially. Like I'm not, because sometimes they'll be like, you sure you guys don't want to take the right path instead of the whatever,
That's
and that's
the worst thing you do.
And that's it's completely against the point of the whole game, right?
Exactly. When I play and someone does something that I have no clue, I just go, "Okay, you guys are going that way now. Roll me perceptions."
Yeah.
That's all you got to say. Or say you travel for this many times and it's time for you guys to go to sleep, make camp, or do whatever you're going to do. Don't let the players know that you got messed up, like saying, "Are you sure?" That's just... I only do that when they're like, "I want to open this door." I'm like, "Are you sure you want to open that door?"
That's something that is fun playing with you because it's almost like Eddie next door, he grows all the hottest peppers in the world. And when he gives somebody a Carolina Reaper or a Dragon's Breath pepper, and maybe they've never even tried a pepper this hot before, he gets this look on his face and like this little laugh. And
It scares the
it
shit
happened
out
on
of me.
Friday when we went down into this place we went. Rich started this laugh, and I was like, fuck. And then when you got up to go grab, like, I was like, what I assumed was like another mini, I was like, oh shit, okay, like, everybody get mentally prepared because something's about to happen.
It's funny because normally I have all my minis prepared in my little tray that you see there. Well, I forgot to put the gelatinous cube in there. So when you guys said, I was like, "Oh, great, I got to go get that." I'm like, "I'm sorry, guys." But that's just human error. It happens once in a while. But
It was awesome.
So that is something that you guys kind of touched on already is, consequences and how you found out that there are consequences in the game on Friday. So stop dancing around and give us some goddamn details.
Take it
already.
back to when Gumby died. Right after that session, you and I were in the back room, and I was like, "You know what, man? like, this is what I love about the game, though. And this is what every time I talk about it, I kind of try to explain to Matthew. Is like, I just love so much the idea that anything is possible.
Oh, yeah.
But there are consequences to your actions, and you have to be prepared for things. And sometimes you just have to get lucky. But that, oh, man. That's the best part about it, though.
Have you tried? Well, I guess you probably wouldn't be the guy to do it, but has anybody that you're playing with tried to kill each other yet? Because I think that would be probably a go-to thing. That at some point somebody would piss me off, and I would have to try to kill him. Do a lot of.
I got stories about
that.
Years ago, me and my wife and a bunch of friends were playing D&D. We were playing an evil campaign. Well, at least me and my one friend were evil. And we were playing with my friend's brother, the one that DMs for Star Wars. And we were planned for like 2 or 3 months how we're going to kill this guy. We had everything planned. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And when the fight starts, so we went into it, and he passed every single solitary saving throw that we could do. And I had instant death, like death touch and harm touch, all this stuff. He was passing everything, and he gets away. Well, I kill my wife in one hit.
Let's clip that.
Which I thought it was hilarious. And my brother, he was like, yo, don't mess with me, I mess with you type of thing. And his wife ported my wife's corpse out of there. So I guess she figured she'd try to res her or something. Well, a fight broke out between me and my friend in real life over it. And we're just now getting to talking about it nowadays. Or talking because there was a lot of things that went on after that. Just PvP's a lot of fun. I will never say it's boring, but there can be hurt feelings with it and stuff like 100%. That too.
Our dad used to play with our uncle, and I think our uncle stopped because our dad killed his character like right away, and he was like, "Look, man, that's the rules," and he got pissed, and I don't think he ever played again.
You know that because you know how my friends are. If I were to play with my friend group, it would take something very minor to set somebody off, and that's exactly how it would happen. Is playing in a shop would be a bad idea for us because it would turn into a real blown like physical fight, and it would last it would be like a 5-minute actual fight between two people, and everybody else would laugh about it, and then everything would be fine. But it would completely disrupt the game. There would be real life consequences to that. I would, without a doubt, can see me throwing a punch at Metzler's face because he did something stupid. But that's one thing I love about everything, and you kind of compared it to gambling. Like there is still a level of compete, and at times it's together, and at times it could turn out to be separate.
We had a player one time. I was DMing, and my two friends, or I should say my wife and two of my friends were playing, and one of the players stole a ring. Well, he didn't steal it. He picked it up and refused to give it to anyone. They were going to sell it for money, so this way everyone can get a profit off of it. But he was like, no, I'm keeping it. Well, it ended up turning into PvP. I'll never forget this day. It was on the 4th of July. 2 of the players were rogues, and the guy that took the ring was a druid. And they positioned themselves right before the fight to flank him so they can get their sneak attack bonuses. We rolled initiative. The 2 rogues went first. They critted both times. Boom, boom. Both of them critted. Almost killed the guy in one
critical
round.
hit. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So it was his turn, and he went to fly away. So he turned into a bird form and flew away. Well, they got free attacks because of that. They critted again. But what made it great was when they critted and killed him, the fireworks went off because it was it was the funniest thing ever. It was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the
I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
Yeah, go ahead. Right the evil part. I don't remember, like an evil campaign. Is that what you called it? Or, do people do that often? Is that something that certain people like to be evil? And
it depends.
Because it's funny. Because last week we had a conversation on the show with our guest Noah about heroes versus villains. Like he loves supervillains and superhero movies, comic books, everything. He loves the villains. He thinks they're cool. He likes the fact that they just like they don't have to live by this moral code that superheroes claim to live by. They can just, if they feel like, I'm pretty sure his exact words were like, if they feel like murdering a family, they just murder a family. They don't have to think about it.
Pretty much.
And I think that that's something, that is an option in the game. And I'm, curious as to how often people, even if they maybe don't start that way, end up going that way, especially. And I don't know how much, I'm sure it's a mix of players, right, that you deal with in the store. I feel like that's something that, more first time, not their very first time, but early stage players would kind of fall into, because maybe they haven't, faced that consequences aspect of it like Andrew was talking about, or maybe they just think it would be fun to try.
Some players do try, and a lot of times they fail because they don't understand the consequences.
Yeah.
So like they'll see a little kid in the street, and the little kid will like call him a moron or something, and then they'll be like, "Well, I'm killing that little kid." I'm like, "Okay, roll your 20. You don't even stop him. Go ahead, go good. Kill him." All of a sudden, okay, now the 3 guards that are over there. Well, congratulations, you bought yourself a jail time or a fight.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much. And after you do that, they tend to chill out.
Yep.
But when you're playing straight evil characters, you have a party of them. So
it's like,
it
let's kill that kid.
They'll kill the kids. The guards will come and say, well, let's kill them too.
Yeah.
And then it turns out into them wanting to slaughter the whole town.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so that's exactly how, then it's like a world domination tour practically, right?
Yes.
And it's like how lucky can you get in the sense of how many people can you kill before you get killed?
Now, the problem is there's always town wizards, and there's always the clergy and stuff like that. So you're only going to kill a few people before the big guns start coming in, and then they wipe you out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it can be fun for a little while.
Yeah. There's always, like, and this is the game really is so cool, because then, in my head, there's always the possibility of escape. And one of the things that I listened to, they got dragon eggs, I think. And so then they ended up, one of them had a dragon that, was like his dragon per se. And he would use it to get out of situations like that. And then, now just sitting here saying this out loud, I'm thinking like, okay, yeah, but maybe those townspeople have a way of, transport like that too, and now they're chasing you across this world because they want to make you answer to, killing their family or whatever.
One thing is, especially when you're a DM, you want the game to be fun for players.
Yeah.
So allowing the players to escape is never a bad thing. I would be like, okay, you guys run away, and of course I'll have something maybe chase you for a little bit, but for the most part, let the players escape and give them a chance to think if that was a bad idea or if they want to continue doing that. And if they want to go on a full-out rampage, they got to be smart about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or good with the die. Hot on the die.
Sometimes the dice don't even help you.
Yeah.
Because some things are just so strong that you could roll all good all day and night, but that one hit, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are, especially in 5th edition, there are really powerful things have like legendary actions.
Okay.
So there are some that you could defeat fully, but one of their legendary actions is like they completely heal themselves. So then if you're in this big fight with them and you're working your way, like taking this guy down, all of a sudden you're back where you started and you guys are all fucked up because you've been fighting this thing, and now this thing can completely take away everything, all of the damage it's taken from you.
Is that a situation though where the DM, in a sense, then plays that? Like, do they have to roll for that, character to see if they get their legendary, use, or is that like I guess it would be written in, or they have it based off of the rules, like, even if you kill them, they're automatically going to have this legendary action.
It depends on the monster, and it depends on the abilities they have, and it also depends if it's a player or an NPC with certain classes and abilities. Okay. It all depends on what you're using.
So, like, some NPCs, then you, like, the DM might have to roll for, or it just depends on how the scenario goes down. They never would roll for them, or
what do you mean?
Like, I listen. The reason that I'm asking this is because the one podcast I had listened to in full at one point in time, it seemed like, and it was all audio, and it was like the first D&D thing I ever listened to. So I couldn't necessarily tell if when, characters within the game, not characters being played by people, were
NPCs.
Yeah, NPCs were, doing these actions because that's what they do, or if there was a way to figure out why they do them.
The DM plays them as he wants.
Okay, so he kind of decides that. Okay,
Yep.
which is it's awesome. It makes me want to play so bad.
Yeah, man, you should.
Yeah.
It'd be luck of the die. Speaking of luck of the die, let's get into what happened on Friday because I want to talk about it. We got super lucky because
I rolled like crap.
Dude, and if that hadn't happened, Sam would be dead. And I think the week before was the week where we all almost died. We all got knocked out.
Yeah,
and Andrew
with the Queen Anne.
With the Queen Anne, Andrew was the only one that made his saving throws. But yeah, so what happened was we got to this tower, this spire in the woods that's been our main goal this whole time. And we opened up these secret underground tunnels underneath. We went down there, and we're just kind of
But you solved the puzzle really quick.
Well, I
solved the puzzle as in how?
Well, so what happened was at the base of this tower there was a stone tablet, and it had like this riddle on it. And it took me longer than I wanted it to because so when we do you remember exactly what it said? It said something about
when the moonlight shines, cast magic light or use magical light or something like that.
When the moon shines, the path is something. So I was like, there's this cantrip called light that you can cast on things, make them glow. So I was like, oh, that's what that means. But our first plan, we were going to wait for it to get dark because we got to this tower at like noon. So we were going to wait for it to get dark and then see if the moon did anything. And I was like, okay, if the moon doesn't do anything, then this is probably what it is. But in the meantime, Sam Phillips' character, enemy of the podcast, Sam Phillips and I, we were like... Because we're the bug-bashing science boys, first and foremost, he and I. Because all we do is bash bugs and learn things about science, and it's great because my character is he's a cleric, but his background is like a scholar. So he is very interested in learning about things and knows a fair amount of stuff. And Sam's half-orc fighter is not very intelligent, so we're just running around like maniacs. And so our idea for this tablet was, well, it says moon. Let's pull our pants down over it and see what happens. So Sam pulled his pants down and it didn't work. But we were like, you know what? Maybe I should do it just in case this is a racist tablet because he's a half-orc and I'm a human. So let's see what happens. But we got down there and I don't know. We were pretty boisterous immediately as we do. And then
boisterous as in
just we weren't being very stealthy, so if there was someone around they would probably. So then we're like, there's all these tunnels and we don't know what's going on. So we're just trying to explore. And then which one? I'm trying to remember. So oh, no, what happened? So we were fighting this ooze. I'm sorry. It's so, I was also thinking about explaining to someone a D&D, something that happened in D&D. It's like trying to explain a dream. Yeah. It'll never be as good. Uh-huh. But this was just so much fun. I want to talk about it.
You guys went down the cave.
Yeah.
As soon as it started, there was a ooze there. And Andrew hits it, and his weapon started rusting right then.
The other Andrew.
So now all of a sudden they're like, we're not hitting these things with weapons at all. So they end up killing that ooze, and then they go down and fight an Urker jelly, and they just kept throwing spells at it and kiting it pretty much. They would just keep backing up and just keep hitting it. Well, it ended up just leaving because they went so far it couldn't see them anymore. So it didn't know they were there, so it left. Well, so they figured, okay, we're just going to run down this cave. So they run, they see a gelatinous cube and say, okay, well, let's just keep running. And then they run into another one. And so they got pinched. And, yeah, then it got bad.
So
real quick.
now Jake's character is on one side of this cube. So it's Jake, cube, me, another cube, Sam and Andrew, and then Rich's NPC, who is with our party right now. And Sam gets these gelatinous cubes. They absorb you.
They suck you in. Yeah.
And that Rich pulled out this mini that was fucking awesome because it's like a cube, and you can take the bottom off and then put the
mini
character mini inside of it, so you can see it's like your guy's
in the
stuck
cube.
in this cube. It's awesome. So Sam is stuck in this cube. I'm in between the two, and the cubes are like moving, trying to
suck you.
So you can roll a strength
check.
Yeah, strength check. So you roll your d20 and then you add your strength, and if you hit a certain number,
well, it's a strength saving throw, so it's a save for strength.
And if you hit a certain number, you can break out of the cube. Well, Sam was in that cube for
Like
six rounds.
And what's funny is strength is his highest stat.
Yeah.
He just kept rolling 1s and 2s and 3s the whole time.
And his modifier to strength is like, I mean, it's at least +4 or something. But so now we're in this weird state where, because again, at first, Andrew and Jake are thinking that they can't hit these
they
gelatinous
can't attack him
cubes.
because
They're
the
like,
weapons are
there's
rushed.
nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. For like, I don't even know how long. And then finally they're like, well, I guess we'll give it a shot. And of course their weapons would have worked the whole time. But so now I'm in between these two cubes, and Sam is stuck inside one. And each time his turn comes around, since he can't do anything, he has to make that throw. And then each time it's the cube's turn, Sam being stuck inside of it is going to take potentially
Hit points.
a ton of damage. Rich was rolling.
I was rolling so horrible on the damage.
And it was like
ridiculous.
So there was just Sam couldn't get out, but he was staying alive.
Yep.
So it was like on my turn, it's like heal Sam for as much as I can with my one action, my bonus action that does not do a lot of healing, but it was crazy. It would give him just enough to survive each next attack. So this whole battle was Andrew and Jake eventually hitting these cubes for like a little bit, and then me just trying to give Sam enough to survive the next round and see if he can break out.
But the cube wasn't coming at you.
The cube would come at me, but you could roll a save.
Okay.
Or whatever, and if you pass, then you don't get absorbed.
It just
pushes you,
Yeah.
like whatever.
What was great was Sam got out and finished off that cube. He went to 0, but because he was an orc, he had this Orcus ferocity, so he got 1 hit point. So he was able to break out with 1 hit point and hit the cube for a stupid amount of damage and killed it.
I think he might have
right before he died.
He might have critted on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when Sam crits, especially
he
with his
hits
magic
hard.
weapon, it's like 6 dice or something that he rolls for damage, and he gets to if it says 1 on the damage die or 2, he re-rolls it. So, and it was unbelievable. it was a big moment, obviously, in like this campaign. It also felt like it was really the first time our players had kind of acted like as sort of a team. You know what I mean? Like everybody kind of knew what they had to do in that moment, and we're all just trying, because we know the stakes are high because we've already seen Gumby pass away, and Sam would be a huge loss because of how strong he is. Yeah. And it was, and I remember we went into the tunnels, and it was, we've been playing for like maybe an hour or something, not super long. It was like, great, we're in this thing, and now we're gonna find what we're looking for, okay? And then this battle ends up taking 11 rounds, which is a lot. I mean, you said the
longest I've ever done was like 13 rounds, 18 rounds, something like that. It was They don't normally get that long.
They were just these two cubes, and you know the gelatinous cube is like a pretty famous D&D monster.
Yeah.
And I had I'd just seen them before, but I never really read about them. But it was like, God, these things. It's a gelatinous cube. Like these are like
a jelly
it's a
cube.
punchline.
Yeah.
It's a punchline, basically. You know what I mean? And then
They almost fucked you up.
yeah, they almost complete. So we ran back into the woods.
And what was cool about that, it showed them a consequence of if you fight a mob or see a mob, you fight it there. You don't
try
go
to
further
run past it,
because
yeah.
then you're just going to bring more and more onto you.
It's so cool, like how
Yeah, that was
just
we were like, this thing's so slow. We can probably just
Yeah.
get out of there.
they sunk. All right. Before we go any further, we should do the Who Would Win of the Week.
Yeah.
And then we'll pop back into D&D. Tee us up for Who Would Win of the Week, please.
Who would win of the week this week is a Jawa from Star Wars, which are the little guys with the robes. They're on Tatooine, versus an Oompa Loompa from Willy Wonka's factory.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Jawa is where when you're at not the new Star Wars part of Hollywood Studios, but when you're at Star Tours and you're going through that line, isn't that like is that them?
No, are you thinking of Ewoks? Because that's Endor.
the-
Ewoks are like the bears,
the teddy
little
The teddy bears, yes.
Jawas are the ones that
Have the hoods.
like collect droids,
Yeah.
basically.
The ones
Yeah.
that shot R2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Now I'm good to go.
Okay. The Jawas are they elude me. They're very mysterious. But I think that the Oompa Loompas have a good shot at beating them because Oompa Loompas are very dexterous. They are doing a lot of dancing and flipping around and stuff like that. And the Jawas,
They have blasters.
yeah, they have blasters, but we're going to take blasters out of the equation this time around. And the Jawas, I mean, they seem a little clumsy, honestly. I guess not too clumsy, but a little more than an Oompa Loompa.
So
for sure.
they are the ones that like collect the sheet metal. Like they take metal, right? And they kind of hoard it and use it to do whatever.
They take anything
Yeah,
and they use it to sell. They're
Yeah.
scavengers.
Yep. Okay. So I said this to Andrew when he brought up the Who Would Win of the Week. I said, it's gonna be tough to argue anything else because I feel like you're gonna have some stats that I probably don't have in my brain.
Those Jawa stats.
Yeah, the Jawa stats. Because I always make myself look like a fool. My thing with Oompa Loompas are evil little shitheads.
Are we talking the old Oompa Loompas or the new ones?
Old
Old Oompa
original.
Loompas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like they are devious little bastards. And they love to create chaos, I feel like.
I'm going to agree with that because we all know Oompa Loompas are basically slaves.
Yeah.
And I think that they do they live in fear of Willy Wonka at all times, and when he's around, they have to act a certain way, or God knows what
I don't
happens
think they
to
live
them.
in fear of them.
I agree. I think they've almost
grateful.
become accustomed to being enslaved. Like, I think they're like, yeah, this is what we do, but not the reason that we still do it, but like in the situations where we can find a way to create chaos, we're going to create chaos because that's our form of entertainment.
A lot of things go wrong at that factory.
Well, they're like, it's like,
They're almost planned.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I say probably Sour Patch Kids comes into my head because it's
Interesting.
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but they, to me, are Sour Patch Kids without the sweet. Like, that's how they act, right? Like, sour, sweet, gone. They're coming up with scissors and cutting your ponytails off, but then they, apologize and they bring you a cupcake. But Oompa Loompas never do that. They just come up and cut the ponytails
cut your
off, and then they
ponytail.
laugh.
Kick you into
We've
the chocolate
never
river.
really seen the Oompa Loompas do anything but sing, though.
But I think dancing as well. And doing these cartwheels and things, and I think that
They try doing cartwheels.
Well, they've got there's a physical prowess, I think, to Oompa Loompas.
They're
And
acrobatic.
they're very acrobatic, and I think that would certainly come into play.
They probably
against
have
the
a set of
Jawas.
trapeze, like, in their break room.
Yeah, seems to be their natural habitat.
But there's two sides to every fight. And that's really the side that we have to focus on to see if the Oompa Loompas stand a chance. And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I'll put it in this way. You stick one in one's element, they're going to win. You stick the other one in the other one's going to win. If you stick a Oompa Loompa in a Jawa's environment, it's going to die. You stick a Jawa in the chocolate factory, it's going to get sucked up in a chocolate pipe.
Because it's going to be probably curious. Like, can I take this pipe off? Yeah, can we bring this pipe home? And
they will lose several Jawas trying to loot that place.
Yeah, I mean, kids stole gum and ended up needing to be squeezed.
Yeah.
I mean.
So, you know, in the situation where they run into each other on the street.
Let's say it's neutral territory.
Yeah. Like, the Oompa Loompas get the night off, and the Jawas have been collecting a ton of, scrap lately, and they got a little extra change, so they're going on a little vacation to,
Well, let me say this
somewhere.
as well. To me, Jawas seem a little more fearful of confrontation.
Yes.
I don't want to.
Whenever anything bad
Unless
happens,
it's a droid.
they seem like they're going to scurry into...
Right. But if they're around...
hiding.
But if you've seen The Mandalorian, when The Mandalorian was messing with them and shooting them on their sandcrawler, they got the best of them.
That's true. Again, but they're also when they're in their crawlers and their numbers are like that large, they're way more confident in those instances.
So is this a
But they do.
Is this a pack versus pack fight, or is this a 1v1, one Jawa,
it's
one
1v1. The Oompa Loompa and a Jawa are the same thing. They're midget. One's in a cloak, one's not.
Yeah, one's in suspenders.
Right,
exactly.
Cloak versus suspenders.
So you would guess the Jawa would lose because obviously you just pull the cloak over his head and just start
feeding
wailing.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, if you're gonna
that's what
fight
I think.
cheap.
Which Oompa Loompas probably are.
Yeah.
Well,
But that's my thing.
Jawas are also. They're both these guys are going to fight dirty.
Yeah.
That's 100% true.
Well, Jawas are already dirty.
Yeah. But that's my thing with Oompa Loompas is I feel like, because to me, being young, I was always, and I'm sure a lot of people have this feeling, like a little bit afraid of Oompa Loompas. Because to me, they are... The fact that they're enslaved is why they act nice. If they were a free group...
Well, if you watch Willy Wonka, the reason that the Oompa Loompas were there is because he rescued them from where they were. They were being eaten by a lot of predators. So he invited them into the chocolate factory to work for him, and that's why they gladly do it. They're not slaves.
Interesting.
That's a good chunk of knowledge because I think most people operate under the assumption that Oompa Loompas are slaves.
Then maybe they've gotten a little too comfortable in their new habitat then because, seeing the way they act, you would have never guessed that they were...
I just think they hate kids.
Yeah. But to me, I was always a little bit scared of them, and probably because you're a kid when you watch it, and I guess if they hate kids, that's where it comes from, thinking about it that way. But they seem evil to me. They seem like they have a very evil side.
They're hardened by the jungle, as the Jawas are hardened by the desert.
Which is, what... So...
But when it comes to, athletic ability, it's the Oompa Loompas over Jawas.
Do you know why they're more athletic? Because when Star Wars was made, a lot of the people playing Jawas were adults on their knees. That's why they shuffle
around?
That's why they moved like that, yeah.
Because that's how I assume.
Well, that's going against them in this fight.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, I'd have to assume that, they have somewhat of a sense of... somewhat of an ability to sneak a little bit, right? Because
Jawas?
Yeah.
100, yeah.
Because they're definitely taking things that they shouldn't be taking a good amount of the time. And I'm sure they're also, moving things far distances through not ideal terrain, which probably also
their machine
factors
does
in.
most of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So...
My thing is if it's with the blaster or without, that's really going to determine. And they also have droids that they have collars with, so they just push a button and the droid does what they say. So,
I do think that the Jawas would, if an Oompa Loompa was just beating the piss out of a Jawa, and the Jawa was on the ground, and the Oompa Loompa was like standing over it, right?
Ground and
like
pound
thinking
style.
he's in ground and pound style, thinking he's like in charge, like about to finish this thing off. The Jawa's gonna have something up his sleeve, like he's gonna throw dirt in this Oompa Loompa's eye or something like that, and then try to gain the advantage there. So it's gonna be.
I guess it would.
Tough.
I guess you have to look at it in the sense of how persistent is an Oompa Loompa going to be? Because I think you're right, but I don't think their initial instinct when they finally get to catch their breath, not get to catch their breath, but get out of the grasp of the Oompa Loompa is going to be to turn around and fight back. I think it's going to be to get away.
Not only that, what would an Oompa Loompa be doing outside of the factory to begin with?
Yeah, well, I told you.
You only see them there, even if on their day off.
Yeah.
They wouldn't, if they were out, people would freak out.
Which makes it, yeah. I would, if I saw an
little
Oompa
orange
Loompa,
guy running around.
I would beat the fuck out of it, no questions asked. And if I had to face repercussions like that, I would be like, listen, I saw an Oompa Loompa. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but I couldn't let this thing even
explaining that to a police officer.
Be like,
exactly.
The circus is in town. What's going on?
Yeah. I would not. Yeah, Oompa
right.
Loompa coming at me.
Let's
so
lock it in and go around.
I think I'm gonna have to take Oompa Loompa because of the fact that notoriously the Who Would Win of the Week, there's no true weapons. This is a little bit different because sometimes when a fighter has a weapon as their that's their thing, right? We'll give them that weapon, but because the Oompa Loompas don't have a weapon, you can't really give the Jawas a weapon, which means that the Oompa Loompa probably wins in this case.
Well, I love Jawas, so they win.
Which is a fair point, yeah.
Because there could be Jedi Jawas. So,
have you played any of those in?
yes, actually, I have.
Okay, so
But I'm gonna lock in Oompa Loompas real quick. I'm gonna stick with my gut on this one. I think that the Oompa Loompas would pull it off.
all right.
It's tough though.
So we're going 2-1 here. Oompa Loompas right now in head. Vote on that on our Instagram on Friday. Who would win of the week? At 2 Nicole on Instagram. I have a follow-up question for you. Who do you think would win in a fight? Spider-Man or a Jedi?
A Jedi. Real quick.
And any thoughts?
Yeah, I disagree. I think Spider-Man.
I
could
think
win.
I 100% agree a Jedi. This is the craziest thing to me.
This
that
was
he thinks
this was a
Spider-Man.
big.
Do you know
Like,
why? One thing and one thing only.
Force choke.
You're done. Lightsaber'd go through him like that.
The Force was the entire point of my argument. That Spider-Man has no.
If it weren't for the Force, of course Spider-Man would stomp him.
Right.
But you got the Force there. And we'll look at, of course, I always go to the strongest one when it comes to this. I go to Lord Vader. Lord Vader would see Spider-Man, and he would just choke him and throw the lightsaber at him. Over.
Yeah. So the fight was. The original fight was Luke Skywalker versus
And that's worse.
Spider-Man.
But we didn't really talk about the choke though.
No,
of the
well,
Force.
we
really only talked about the telekinetic aspect of it.
We did and we didn't. I mean, you just were sitting here screaming at me, yelling, but he's
Because-
Spider-Man. He's got Spidey senses.
He's got the Spidey sense. That's true.
The Spidey sense has no effect. It doesn't matter.
If you're using the Force to hurl rocks at him, obviously he's going to see that coming.
Oh, yeah, he'll
but
see
I
those
think,
coming.
But
Yeah.
I think that even if your intention as a Jedi is to force push Spider-Man up against something, I don't know how you dodge the Force necessarily, but at least he would know that was coming and be able to maybe get off a web
Did
shooter.
you see in Empire Strikes Back when Darth Vader choked Admiral Ozzel? Did you see his hands move?
Yeah.
No.
Well, that's
he
what
just
I
sat
was.
there. He just sat there like this. He just started choking, and he says, "Don't fail me, Admiral," and then turns around. No movements, nothing.
But in New Hope is when we first see the Force choke, right? That guy,
Yeah, that was the first
that
time.
guy,
He,
when he starts getting choked, he's, oh God, what's happening to me? He's adjusting his collar.
but you got to remember, Vader was just trying to make a message. He wasn't trying to kill him. If you remember when Luke Skywalker choked the two Gamorreans, he just did that, and and they did nothing but this. And
So
stood against the wall.
So here's a question. Spider-Man is getting force choked, right? And Vader throws the lightsaber at him with the force. Skywalker, whoever it is, Jedi throws the lightsaber at him. Can Spider-Man, while being choked, use his web to pull the lightsaber away from hitting him? Or is the force... That's the question. Is the force more powerful than the web, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Which I would say the force is... Yeah,
Would
probably.
be more. It'd have to be because he'd be swinging it, so it'd be stronger than Spider-Man. And I don't know, Spider-Man.
I like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Don't get
Well,
me
he's
wrong.
one of the.
Yeah.
People don't realize
love
how
Spider-Man,
strong Spider-Man
yeah.
actually is.
Oh,
He's
he
one
is.
of the
And
physically
yeah.
strongest Marvel characters.
That new movie just came out, Tom Holland. I heard it was really good.
Oh, Uncharted.
Yeah.
I heard that was very good
Yeah,
as well.
but anyway, and I really like Tom Holland Spider-Man. But I'm glad that we got that out of the way. Just because, fuck you, Andrew. But all right, back to D&D and everything that you guys have going on at the shop. Do you, when you, I guess, write, or when you're creating this specific quest, is that the word, a quest?
If you some are quests, some are just storylines.
Progression. Yeah, okay, yeah, because I know earlier I was using the word storyline, and I know that it's not necessarily a storyline. I guess I just didn't know what to call it.
They can be.
Yeah. So do you have? And I know we had the conversation already of you don't like to direct players unless
no, not at all.
Yeah. So in your mind, is there an idea of this is going to take 6 months? This is going to take not at all. And is there a general? So when you start, you put them in this world. Is there a goal they have to accomplish?
That's up to them.
So it could be very prolonged if you want to just explore pretty much.
Yeah,
I mean as long as you can stay alive, I suppose.
What I like to do when I DM, and this is why I gave him the map when we first started, I like to give one objective to the characters.
To start.
If they don't want it, they don't have to take it. But it's something to get them going.
Mm-hmm.
If on their way to this objective, they decide, you know what, I like this better, screw that objective. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The grand thing about it is that map will always be in their hand.
Yeah.
So when one day they're bored or they're done doing whatever, let's go check out the map.
Yeah.
Well, the grand thing about the way real life works, things change. So whatever was in there before probably isn't going to be there the next time they get there.
Yeah.
Who knows? The spire itself might not even been there.
Yeah.
Just depends on the flow of things.
So say you were to backtrack somewhere, it could be, things could have completely changed depending on what's going on in the world around them at the time.
Yeah,
So
somebody else could have already gone.
someone
in
could
there.
have
In
looted
fact,
it.
that still could have happened.
So,
like,
and when you
even
say
right
somebody
now.
else, do you mean somebody else as in, what was
An
it?
NPC?
An NPC, okay. So, which is so cool. And there was something that you guys unintentionally brought up. What are you doing over there?
Oh, the post-it notes are coming
Yeah.
through.
God damn it, Emily. You're just getting bored back there. Suck it up. Yeah. You had talked about the situation where that group of people got turned to stone,
Yeah.
and then you had mentioned separately when we were talking about what you guys were up to and the last time you played, and you said, well, it was noon. So how big of a factor does time play into this, and how do you? So when I heard these two things get said, it kind of clicked in my brain. Something that I never even considered is time in the game is a thing too.
Yeah.
So those people were frozen in stone for 200 years. For them, it was
Seconds.
it was instant. Whereas you guys are sitting around trying to wait. So do you have an idea in your mind of distance traveled versus time, or is it depend on how they travel?
On my map, I have a grid on there.
So it's almost like a key, right? Where you're
Yeah,
taking a ruler. This is 2 miles.
My squares on there are 2 days of travel.
Okay.
So half square is a day. The rest of the square is 2 days.
Okay.
So that's how big the map is. So
Yeah.
if a character is going from here to here, I just count the number of squares and times it by 2. That's
Yeah.
how many days it takes.
That's so. I bet you that's something that a lot of people, in my shoes that have never played D&D don't even consider, and that's why it blows my mind that no offense, Andrew, that when you guys first started playing, you guys even tried to sit down and create your own kind of storylines to go into.
Well,
because how could you have possibly?
Because they sell pre-written ones.
Yeah, I know.
So that's,
yeah,
that's what a lot of people.
Yeah.
Most people start off with.
Okay.
You bought one kit, whatever the kit was. I think the Essentials kit.
and it's got a couple different of like.
I think it's just got one.
Which is pretty cool, that Essentials kit, I should say.
Some of those kits, yeah.
The dice in there, I was like, wow. When I was first started playing, you had to pay to get dice that came in the Essentials box. All those red dice.
Yeah.
I had to buy a tube of those for $10. So the dice themselves, that whole set of dice that you got in there, I had to pay separately for $10 when I was playing it when I was younger. So to see that you get the screen, you get those cards, you get those dice, I'm like,
yeah, you do get like a little
wow, this is like really cool.
It is cool. And again, I think that's just something that they have realized about making the game easier for new people to start up like right away.
And that I see things online too, like these awesome looking things, like you were talking about the minis, and we've had this conversation separately, and the cube and the dice, and like I remember being young, and I don't know if you remember this, but going through the back room in our basement just one day by chance and finding like a D12, the 12-sided die. It was just a little black die with the white numbers on it. That was our father's from when he was God knows how old, and that's like is still partially my image, and that's why it's just so cool to see all of this stuff. And I'm sure having played it for however long you've played it, you've gotten to see this kind of revolution of how cool shit is and how interactive it can be outside of just rolling the dice and having these thoughts in your brain, or even drawing them on paper of what you might look like or what places might look like.
Which I do like to draw my
stuff.
and
that's cool, and because and you can get custom stuff like that, right? Like you can, which is just a whole other.
I think the best thing about D&D nowadays is actually being able to find people to play.
Yeah.
When I was younger, you were considered a nerd, and no one that was not cool to do. Now it's like it's the cool thing. I'm like, why couldn't I have been born a little later?
Yeah.
But the cool thing about it is finding people to play. When I first started, I had 2 people that I played with.
Yeah, your friends growing up, probably.
And we got lucky if another person joined. At that time, the most I played was like, besides myself, was 3 people. Now, my highest group I've ever played was 13.
That's crazy.
I DM'd for 13 people, and that was nuts. But it worked, and it was fun having that many people around the table.
So, how good of, I don't know, I'm going to say notes, because I think that's what I would do. How good of notes are you taking in a game where you're DMing for 13 people?
I don't take notes.
You're remembering it, or?
Well, what it is when I'm playing, the only thing that I write down are initiatives. So if this person rolls a 10, I write their initiative numbers so I know who goes first in the round. Other than that, I don't write nothing during the game because my focus is on making sure that the players are enjoying themselves, making sure that all my notes are pre-done.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
which
you gotta
is a
remember,
skill, though.
Well, because Rich, again, like, he created this world that we're playing in, and when people do that, they kind of know everything that's going on. It's up to the players to write down things that they want their character to remember.
Yes.
So the note taking
is done.
And like, for example, one of the thoughts that I was having during our conversation was, you mentioned how you gave Andrew the map, but when he first had the map, nobody else knew he had the map
unless he showed it. No.
Yeah, which I did immediately.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that was my question. So then once they
know.
searched your body and Gumby's body, and they had the map, now it's almost like, well, assuming again that whoever found it shared it, now it's like, okay, everybody can look at the map. But in theory, you could have kind of asserted yourself as the leader of the pack by saying, this is where we're going. because
That's true, but
yeah. Well, it depends on how you want to play. Again, it
yeah,
goes
yeah,
back
yeah.
to-
But the thing about Gumby in particular, which again, it's just like you're playing out, not to use the term story. Take whatever you think of, whatever you're thinking, like bring that down. Like don't think about story right now in like beginning to end. Think about all the little parts. Those are the parts that you're developing together. So Gumby had a -2 to survival rolls. So when we were in the woods
get lost.
somebody get lost like nobody's business. The big thing, like we created essentially because of how poorly I would roll this
Side story, basically.
Of-
Side quest.
this whole thing of how like this inside joke that Gumby just can't find firewood.
Oh, I forgot about the
Yeah.
firewood.
So he would just like he'd also we'd always be like, Gumby, go get the firewood. He'd be like, I'll do it, and then he'd go into the woods. And even if I rolled even if I rolled like a 7 on the die, it'd be like a 5 with the skill modifier. So then he just comes back like a handful
With
of
a little
dry
bit of-
leaves or something like that. Which I like now that Franklin was able to find like a pretty good amount of wood.
Nice.
The
Shout out
new guy,
Franklin.
yeah.
Man, I know I've asked a ton of questions, but it's so cool. I don't know, I'm sure at some point it gets like repetitive having to explain it so much, but it's just being able to hear, it makes you want to play so bad. And I bet you, I'm not the only, people that will listen to this are going to feel the same way, because it's also cool to hear, like you get excited about it. That makes me want to play, right? Well, both you guys, right? And there's, I have two things to say, but I'll say this first because this is kind of flows better. Is there like a feeling of happiness or gratitude when you get to see people enjoying so much the world that you created?
When I see people enjoy it, it fuels me to continue doing it. Because that's my sole purpose of doing it. If they're having fun, I know I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to push further to make it better the next time they play.
So is that something that you do then? Andrew and his buddies are playing this specific, in this specific world right now. Say they finish, or even if they haven't necessarily finished yet, and you're like, a couple things happened, but, maybe we could, put in a couple different things that might make it even interesting if somebody were to end up following a similar path, and they might not, but they might. Will you go back in and edit that, or you made that and that's going to, that'll stay that way?
I don't edit. Once it happens, it happens.
Yeah. I don't mean live in them. I mean if somebody else were to go play, like once it's made though, it's made. You're
talking about if another group goes through the
yeah.
same
So
thing?
you're saying how there's somebody else playing in the same world right now, and they're just below. But say
something happened that it
3
didn't
months,
like or something?
yeah, 3 months from now,
Oh, yeah.
somebody else comes in and they start to play, and you're like, well, just in case they go here, let's add the potential for this to happen. So you'll make little changes like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Which is so cool, too. Because in theory, you could play the same world again. And not that you would end up in the same spot, but if you did, you might have no clue.
I could start a game right now, put them in the exact same town, exact same area, and their game would be 100%
Completely different. Which
Yeah.
is the coolest thing about it.
Because I know you
Yeah.
pride yourself on your towns as well. Like
Yeah.
Which is it's so cool to me. I do have a question also, and this is for both of you, about like developing these characters, because you had mentioned sometimes when new people come in certain situations you'll kind of create a character for them, and not all the time, but it might help them be able to flow with the game better. What goes into making these characters? Obviously they have a backstory, right? Like you even mentioned that Gumby had a brother that never even came up in the game before he died, but you had written that into his backstory, or that's just an idea you had in your head, like I think Gumby has a brother.
No,
and at some point it might come up.
Yeah, I mean it all depends on, as far as the character part of the characters go, I mean that all depends on what you want to do as a player. Like I really like that, but like Jake and Sam, for example, I don't think their characters really have
much of a backstory
backstories, at least that they've like fleshed out or anything. But like that's the part that that's something that I've learned the more that we've played, is that's something that I really like. Is
well, because that's
such a game element, is like if you know about this character's past, and then you have to start making decisions if you want to play the game in a way that feels more genuine and honest. Just to me, I'm saying you have to make your decisions based on what this character you're playing would do,
and
based
having
on
a
everything they've been through
backstory
before.
helps that out a lot, because you kind of know what they've been through in a sense.
The cool thing about backstories for players, and I always encourage players to have them, because it gives the DM an idea of what you want.
So that was my follow-up question, was they write, they have these character sheets, they fill them out, and then they submit them to you. So you see them, and you're like, okay, so
I can put that in.
I was going to say, so in theory, had Gumby lived, could there be a part where you make his brother in the game as an MVC, or is that...
See, but the way that I operate, his brother would have been in there if he lived. His brother, though, would have went off the rails.
Yeah, which is exactly how it should be.
And he would eventually have to either A, deal with his brother, or just forget he had a brother and let his brother do whatever he wants. So,
and like, that, because again, and it's got my brain racing, because this is how I think, but I think like, and I'm sure you do this all the time, just in your head, just throughout the day when you're thinking back on things. Like, to me, it's like, oh, I know he has a brother. Maybe he goes off the rails, but he doesn't know he goes off the rails, and they show up to a random town that he's never been to before, and everybody fucking hates him because his brother was just there 3 weeks ago and got too drunk and caused mischief.
What I like to do, that's really cool, because the town reflects like, yo, this is his brother, but they wouldn't react like that until they found out that it was his brother.
Uh-huh.
But the cool thing is, and I like to add twists on things because it's just more fun. We'll say his brother is this terrible person. We'll come to find out he had a spell casted on him where he's being controlled. Well, when he finds out about it, right before he's about to kill his brother or has to deal with his brother, now he's got to find out who's controlling his brother, and it puts a whole nother thing to
and then in his mind, he wants to go after that person, but everybody else might not.
Exactly.
So does that come into play? I know you had mentioned going rogue earlier. You don't have to stay in a pack in theory, right? You can go different directions, and then when it's your turn, the storyline might just shift. The narrative shifts because you're not doing what everybody else in the game is doing.
Yep.
It is so fucking cool.
You can literally do anything you want as long as you are willing to potentially pay the price for it.
Exactly.
And it's it made me so happy when you said that part about you and Sam, like, in the game, your characters pulling the pants down, because because those are the things that, and that's kind of how I started the my part of the conversation when we started here today. It's like, well, like, I always feel like I would think of these obscure things, like how does that fit into the game, and hearing you guys talk about it and the things that have happened, it makes so much more sense to me, like how like the development of the storyline or the development of the game works, like between each specific game, and it makes it. I bet you I think there's a lot of people that are going to hear this that are like me, that are like, this sounds so fucking cool.
It is, and the thing with Sam's character and my character is obviously every time we're interacting with each other, our characters are developing. So now, because of the fact that we're the bug bashing science boys, and based on like Franklin, my character's past, like if something happens to Sam's character, that's going to really affect him, because
Franklin.
they seem to be
pals.
Yes, they seem to be building something pretty close, and it's awesome. And when everything, like we were talking about maps and stuff, when everything is done mechanically kind of correctly, it gives you the freedom to do everything else any way you want, which is that's the way to do it. And that's why it's so great playing with Rich, somebody who really knows what they're doing, is because everything is like the mechanics of what he's putting together are good, and when it's done well, it's the best game in the world.
So, in theory, say there were to be a battle, and Sam's character dies, and Franklin, for whatever reason, feels that Jake or Andrew's characters could have done more. Mm-hmm. Franklin might be off the deep end.
He might, yeah. Could happen.
It's so cool. So, I guess this is more of a question for you, and it kind of ties into the shop and everything. If you're somebody like me who listens to this and they're like, dude, all this makes me want to do now is go home and try to find a way to play D&D. What is kind of the best route? Is it a starter pack and maybe play a couple of the pre-writtens? Is it,
I always tell people they come into the store that have never played before. It's happened a few times, and they'd be like, what do I need to do? And I always say, get the starter pack. Don't buy any books. Don't waste, because you don't know if you're going to like it.
Yeah.
Spend the minimal amount of money you can, which is just buying the essentials pack or the beginner's box. Play that with some friends, and if you guys enjoy it enough, then start getting deeper into it. Make sure you like it first.
Yeah. Because there is an element of, like, you have to be willing to commit to that role-playing aspect, which is probably something that in a setting with people that they don't know would make some people uncomfortable or timid, and it would greatly affect the outcome of the game as far as people wouldn't enjoy it if you're not committed to it.
There's also certain things certain people like and certain people don't like. And I personally think this thing is silly, but some people like it. There's a sheet that have check-off boxes of your comfortability. So, like, I don't like murder, or I don't like this, and I think it's the most silliest thing in the world.
Yeah, because then you are already
limiting the DM.
Yeah,
but there are people that are really like that. So if you have a small knit group of people that know how they're going to react, it's great. So that's why it's not always good to just go jump into a group of people you don't know, because, like, for example, me, I do not care about
they're
feelings.
Having sex with dragons and shit like that.
My God, there was that. Yeah.
Which it does happen.
Yeah.
And I personally don't care. If a player does something, I'm not going to scold them just because this person doesn't like it.
Yeah, thinks it's inappropriate. Well,
I like adding as much realism as I can. And in real life, people slaved people. In real life, people killed, raped, murdered. Mm-hmm. I like to add it into my game because it makes the game feel that much more realistic.
Yeah. And it allows you to sink your teeth into that role-playing aspect of it.
Oh, yeah.
And it lets you know.
Andrew's big on consequences today.
I cannot stress enough that how much
Andrew
I love
figured
that
out
aspect
that things
of the
have
game.
consequences.
But that's like when we were when we first went to Rich's store, Andrew DeRico and I, we were like, yeah, we'd be down to play. That's the first thing you said was like, listen, I don't hold back unless you guys really want me to or whatever. But you were like, if there's a big orc like sex slavering or whatever, like that's just gonna happen and stuff. And then we ran into Frips the other day, who I have questions for on Friday that I've been thinking about. But Frips is like he's not a squirrel, but he looks like a squirrel.
They're called Caserpas. They're squirrels that basically are not sentient, sapient. So they talk and they wear clothes. They're like humans, except they're a natural squirrel.
Yeah.
And Frips told us that his squirrel mom was raped by an orc. And so then...
He hates orcs.
Yeah. Which is what Sam is. So that plays a big factor.
Oh, on how you... Or
Sam's a half orc, I think. But
still.
Yeah. But it all...
It sounds...
It's the best. And like I said, like, when you... The other thing is, like, when we first played with you, I know Andrew and I were a little nervous about that we would be intimidated potentially because we know, obviously, that your skill level is so much higher. But you like to play with newer people or less experienced people. And, I mean, we were, like, you made us comfortable so quickly, and we have learned a lot even since we've just started playing.
Oh, yeah. The great thing about playing with newer players is I like to get the newer players before someone that doesn't know what they're doing gets them, because then they get a different idea of how the game is played. So when I play with them and they find out how the game can be done and what you can do and how much freedom they have, people always want to come back and play. I've never had a person go, that was terrible. Never once. I've always had people always come back.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me want to come there really bad. I can't stop thinking about it. And
it's cool. It's a cool store.
I mean, we could. The problem with a game that you can do whatever you want is we could sit here and talk about it forever.
Yes, which is why typically like the sessions are like 4 hours long.
Yeah.
So
which I don't feel that long either.
No, not even a little.
Time flies. But and to touch on, kind of what you were saying and Rich, how you answered is like, there was a part of me, and we do this every week, right? But there was a part of me that was like, well, I don't, I have a lot of questions about the game, and I don't want to start asking questions that feel too dumb, because I didn't want it to get like, well, why do I got to answer this? But it was the more like we started talking about it, it's just so cool to find out. You said that you were thinking in your mind questions that you have for the squirrel guy. I don't remember his name.
For Frips.
You've been thinking about it already this week. How much of that starts to happen once you sink your teeth into like a new game in a new world, like as a DM and as a player, like in both situations?
The funny thing, when you're playing with players and you make NPCs, you never know what the players are going to like or dislike. So you could spend hours on this one NPC. It's like, okay, I got everything about him, what's going to happen to him, and the characters meet him and go, meh. Yeah. And then you can just put a character and be like, okay, you see some old lady with a wart on her nose. I want to talk to her.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what? So it's really interesting watching players gravitate to an NPC that you had no idea that they were going to even be interested in.
And like, you kind of mentioned it earlier, and I don't know how it happens, but you said one of the NPCs was currently with you in that fight against the gelatin cubes, and that was one of the things that I've seen happen in videos and podcasts that I've watched is they'll roll dice to put spells on certain people in the game so that they follow them or listen to them and stuff like that. Yeah, charms, which is just a completely like other aspect. It's too much. I will say right now that I think that depending on what happens, you have to come back on and we have to go through like what happened in this world and how Franklin survives and
hopefully
how Gumby was remembered and I need
nobody's
to know more about it.
Gumby.
Yeah.
He's long gone.
Though there may be a possibility where Gumby's brother's gonna be like, "I heard you guys are with him. What happened?"
Yeah,
yeah.
And you got, and then you
and
have to kill Gumby.
They didn't even know that Gumby has a brother. Like he never told any of them that. So
well, they will now if they listen to this.
Yeah, but still the characters.
Yeah,
their characters don't know.
Yeah.
Which is, and again, that's one of the things that makes it like challenging to play is you have to take on the role of this character. It really is like acting in a sense.
Yes,
but yeah,
very much so.
But without a script, even. I mean, you have how your character would react to situations, and then you just get thrown into them, and it really is cool.
Yeah. And your character does not always turn out the way that you think they're going to.
Be.
Nope.
Like things happen, and then your character like completely changes based on like events and things like that. I mean, if this is anybody's first real kind of dive into Dungeons and Dragons, it's the most incredible game.
Actually, any RPG.
Yes.
They're practically all the same.
Absolutely. I always go to Dungeons and Dragons, but
most people do, but there are so many good ones out there, like D6 Star Wars.
Yep.
That's one of my personal favorites.
Yeah. Which the cool thing you've mentioned about that is that you can play as like any like race of alien, basically.
Yeah.
which is awesome.
It's so cool.
And so I know we kind of touched on it, but it's a different game in the sense where there's different rules, but you're still creating. It's still all your brain doing the work.
It's all story. What makes Star Wars a little easier is you're basing it off of someone's already created work.
Yeah.
right.
So when you go to like Tatooine, you
Yeah.
know what Tatooine looks
Yeah.
like. And the
Yeah.
great thing is the people that have watched Star Wars know
Yeah.
what Tatooine looks like.
And
So it makes it easier.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I thought was so cool about, like just stuff like that in general. Like Black Spire Outpost is where the new like Disney World land, Star Wars land is, right? And you could go back and fact check it probably to see what they made it, how accurate it is and stuff like that. And all things like that are just fascinating to me, how much work goes into stuff like that and how passionate about it people are. And that's one of the reasons why I think it can be so cool. If you can find somebody like yourself, Rich, that, enjoys putting their time into developing this world that, that anything can happen and you care about it. And it's not like, like you're saying, oh, well, I didn't have time to figure out what was going to happen if you went over there and I don't feel like making it up. So maybe you guys should just go over here. If
they were to do something I didn't have prepared, they wouldn't even know it.
Yeah. And that's, you got to go check out the shop. What is the name of the shop again?
It's Red Dragon's Hoard.
Red Dragon's Hoard on Military in the Falls.
It's on Military, almost right across from the mall.
Okay. Yeah, I think you actually told me where it was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're at all sitting here like me thinking about how badly you want to try to play, go to the shop, ask Rich what you need to do, buy your starter pack, go figure it out, and just start huck and die.
Once in a while, I do run how to play D&D sessions. Okay. So people, basically, you go in there and y'all get a character sheet, and I'll teach you how to make one and then explain the basics of it. Also, sometime in the near future, I'm going to be doing a DM seminar to teach people how to DM that don't know how. So I have plans for getting people to get comfortable with the game. So if they decide to start their own game or play not in the shop, they can do it easily.
It just sounds awesome.
Yeah. I know we got to get going, but wrap it up real quick. We'll put the website link in the description of this episode and everything, so people can check out like upcoming events and things like that. And then Saturday is like an open.
Yes, Saturday from 7 to 10 is open D&D. Anyone can just come on in and play. I have people that have been there since I started doing the Saturdays almost every single solitary time. Some people jump in and out. Like I said, we had like 8 people join in last Saturday. Man. So.
And it's a cool space. Like, you've got a lot of other tables in there as well.
Yeah,
for people just like.
I'm going to try to get some more bigger ones in there too, because like I told you before, I wanted to do some competition type D&D. So whenever that comes about, it'll be on the website also. So.
Yeah, because that's going to be very interesting. That's going to be really cool.
If there's competition D&D, I'm going to train. I'm going to kick your ass.
If Rich puts together kind of what he was telling me about, then you will be very into this particular one, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway.
As somebody who's never lost anything.
Ridiculous.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate, honestly, I know you are technically a host on the show too, but I appreciate both you guys answering my questions, because I really do think it's one of those things where there are, it's hard to ask sometimes people, because you don't always get the opportunity to, and so that makes it a little hard to learn.
And you don't know how they're going to react to
exactly, because but going back to
with D&D in particular, if you are asking questions and somebody is like acting negatively towards
you don't want to play with them anyway.
Exactly.
That's what I mean though. It's almost like, you had kind of said, when you first started playing, it was like, oh, like that's for nerds, right? But I feel like that kind of leaves the stigma behind to where it was almost like, oh, like we don't even want to. If you don't want to play our game, we don't even want to explain it to you anyway.
There are some people like that.
Yeah, and so that's why. I mean, I really do think that like it's getting more and more popular, and more people that probably never imagined themselves playing are going to find out like this is something that I really want to do.
Oh yeah.
So that's my biggest thing. Thank you for coming on and explaining that
you're
stuff. And seriously, down the road when Andrew and those guys finish the quest, I'd love to have you back on and we can kind of talk, because at that point
we could do like a
there'll
big
be
old
there'll be no
wrap-up.
You mean
exactly.
you mean finish the quest they're on, or just
no? I mean
game?
finish.
Well,
They'll never finish.
They'll never finish. Yeah, because
it'll
it's
just go forever.
Yeah, that's again.
It ends when they die or they decide they don't want to play.
Well, so maybe when you die eventually, then we can come back in.
Franklin Sherbert forever.
Yeah, no. When you die again for the third time.
Wow.
No, but
Well, technically,
I mean,
Franklin.
listen. No disrespect to Jake Lemadou, but he's got to be on the fence of dying soon, right?
He, I think he only went down. He's only ever gone down like once.
He'll die soon.
He stays for the most part. He stays behind.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
bit.
Yeah. He calls his mother and sees which die he should roll. So.
Wow.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Shout out to Jake.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad we finally got you on here, Rich.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Yep. Again, link for the store is going to be in the description of this episode and everything. And I'm glad we did this, because I'm glad
Me
that
too.
you.
Well,
We were able to talk about D&D a little more with
and
you.
we got going too. I usually like to shut us down, but we went.
that's
we went
true.
pretty hefty because I had questions. Yeah. All right. I love you, Andy.
All right, I love you too. Let's get out of here. Thanks, folks.